Everyone said he wouldn't blame me for his death, but the hatred that filled the room whenever he comes to visit is suffocating. I keep remembering the night of his death, me drinking a little too much, and him telling me to stop. Us driving together, laughing, singing along to the radio. The sunset, its pink and orange glow illuminating the sky around us. It was perfect, and I felt free. He screamed my name. I saw the other car, but it was too late. He grabbed the wheel, turning it sharply to the right. The rest was a blur. The car flipped, the sound of glass shattering, the airbags ejecting and sharply making contact with my chest, my seatbelt tightening around my waist. Multiple cars had pulled over. A woman was frantically calling 911. Someone eventually pulled me out of the car. I felt fine. My head throbbed a little bit. Maybe a minor concussion, but I was okay. A man kept holding my hand, asking me if I was alright, but I just heard a ringing in my ears. I called out his name. Another woman who had pulled over tried to take me away from the car, so I couldn't see him. I remembered the pity in her eyes when I turned around and saw his body, lifeless and bloody. The days, weeks, and months following the accident were hell. I stayed in bed all day, every day, and haven't returned to school since. My parents have kept their distance. My phone has been blowing up, but I haven't checked it once. The depression sitting in on me is so dark and heavy that I can't breathe. At night, I feel him standing at my bedroom door. He just watches me. Tears fall from my eyes, soaking my pillows. Why does he hate me so much? I never meant for it to happen. Every night he comes, the night before his birthday. He stands at the foot of my bed instead of at the door, closer than he's ever been. I sit up and look at him. He looks the same, but fuzzier, like before you rub your eyes and everything is blurry. I love you, I say quietly, my voice breaking. I hope those 4 drinks were worth it, my little brother replied, his voice filling the room. And then he was gone. There's a ghost in town, you know, and not one of the harmless ones either. She died of a broken heart after a loss of her daughter. If you're sensitive, you can see her walking the streets, screaming and rending her clothes. She says she won't rest until she found out who murdered her child, and she means it. The daughter's boyfriend thrown out of the window over and over. Her school rival, face pressed against an iron. Her father, the ghost's husband, nearly drowned in a bathtub. She appears hurling accusations and hurts you until you confess. It usually doesn't take long, but she still doesn't move on and realizes it's a lie, so she leaves and finds the next person on the list. Sometimes her screams become sobs. What if it was some wandering vagrant who left town weeks ago? Some serial killer who picked a random target they have no connection to? What if she never learns the truth? I try to tell her she does know, of course. I point to the note. I tell her over and over, no one killed me. I took my own life. You don't need to keep hurting people. It was all my fault. And she leans down and gently takes my skeletal face in bony hands and shakes her head. Of course you didn't. I know, my daughter. I always accepted you. I did everything I could to make you happy. You wouldn't do this. Someone faked the note. I know it. I was a good mom. You wouldn't have done this. I tried to explain over and over, but she's not listening. She suspects the local priest now. She'd never quite trusted him anyway. My guilt is no match for her rage, so all I can do is watch as she floats away. Shortly, I hear screams from the church. There's a ghost in town, you know, and not one of the harmless ones either. And I'm so sorry. Bro, I still don't get why you can't just buy the booze for me. Figures my younger brother would want to wuss out at the last second, right as we're huddled outside the liquor store. Sure I could, I mockingly replied, wrapping an arm around the teen's shoulders. Except then it wouldn't be much of a rite of passage, eh, doofus? Landon nods sheepishly. Anyways, you've got nothing to worry about. You're half a foot taller than I am. Plus, the fake ID I made for you is my best work yet. His eyes furrow, doubtfully, as he peers over the plastic card for the 100th time today. The replica of a driver's permit is indistinguishable from an ordinary DMV license, with the addition of a fake title and address. But the same Angus Clay Robertson, do you really think I could pass for a 22-year-old named Angus? To this complaint, I just rolled my eyes and shoved him into the direction of the liquor shop. Get something decent, I yelled. From near the shop's window, I watch as Landon gingerly selects a wine bottle and joins the queue. One by one, the line in front of him empties. Soon enough, it's his turn at the counter. ID? Asks the middle-aged shopkeeper disinterestedly from inside. Landon fumbles for a few seconds before producing the doctored license, holding it up for the clerk to read. The shopkeeper's face glazes over it in concentration. Then, very suddenly, he snatches the card out of Landon's hands. When the man finally speaks, his voice is quivering with rage. You're him, aren't you? You're the son of a bitch drunk driver that killed my son. What? Landon blanches, clearly confused. No, sir. I think you have me confused with someone else. Don't you dare lie to me, the shopkeeper screams. Angus Clay Robertson, from Bloomington, Minnesota. It was all over the papers. I know that name is everywhere. By now, my skimmish brother could barely stammer a response. No, man, no. This isn't even my real ID, it's just a fake. I rushed to the entryway to see Landon slumped, unconscious on the ground. Red blood seeping from his skull into a pool of redder wine. Standing over him is the shopkeeper, clutching the neck of a Merlot bottle he smashed over my brother's head. At the sight of my handiwork, I barely stifle a grin. Everything has gone exactly as I predicted it would go when I picked out his liquor store and printed out that name on this ID. Lucky Landon might have been gifted with height and looks, but I always had him beat when it came to brains. Poor kid, I think, mirthfully. Not everyone can handle their first bottle. I woke up and it was one of those mornings. One where I'm drenched in sweat, barely clothed, and where I have vomit all over my bed. I tried to do it yesterday, but I couldn't. I tried to finally end my suffering, the agonizing pain that doesn't ever leave me alone, but I failed. The handful of pills and the bottle of wine that I chugged somehow didn't help. I'm tired. Another day of pain for me. Another day of working my job as a janitor at a concert hall. I came in and my coworkers pretended not to notice me, as per usual. My boss noticed me and briefed me. There's a Pink Floyd cover band playing in the main hall today, and they brought lots of light effects. Our electrician grid won't provide enough power, so make sure the extra generators are running. Now chop chop, there's about 1,500 people coming in tonight. I watch the crowd seep into the venue, lively, excited faces. I can't help but feel a little excited myself too, more than I have been in some time. But why do they deserve to be happy, and do I not? I go to the control room and spin up the generators. I hope my boss will be happy with my efforts tonight. The crowd has taken their seats, and I close the concert hall doors. The show will start any minute now. The hallways are completely empty, and I lock the front doors too. I can hear the band go on stage while I make my way backstage. I make sure all the outside doors are closed and locked, after which I head up to the control room, where I find my boss lounging. I flip the switch that controlled events. My vision's becoming blurry. The crowd seems to feel that something's off too. There's lots of yawning, and the band is getting duller by the minute. I can see them struggling, just as I was struggling yesterday. The light effects are showing the thick, foggy mist that occupies the air. Boss has resorted to a nap behind me, and my head starts spinning while the band's lead singer falls over. The hall has almost gone completely quiet now. Someone will eventually find out that I hose the exhaust fumes from the generators into the concert hall, and I hope they realize that happiness is only real when it is shared. The teacher stood at the front of the classroom, her back to the children, as she wrote the day's assignments in big bold letters on the board. She took her time, enjoying the silence her attentive class was giving her. She dotted her I's with hearts to reflect the mood she was in. When her words looked as good as they could, she turned and faced her students, a huge smile on her lips. "Now children, I know we got off on the wrong foot last week," she spoke, her voice conveying the disappointment she had felt at her students' disobedience. "I also know we all want to do better. Therefore, I've decided to forget last week even happened. Today is a new day, and a new chance to do something productive with our lives." She watched her students as they stayed quiet, all eyes fixed on her. No one fidgeted, no one whispered to their neighbor. Nobody did anything but watch her. Her smile grew even wider. They were off to a great start. "John, thank you for sitting right in your chair today. Claire, thank you for not using your phone in class," she said, acknowledging the corrections they had made. "Thank you all for not talking while I'm talking." She walked around the classroom, her heart swelling at the improvements. This was how a class should behave. "I see you already have your books out and turn to page 86. I want you to read this chapter silently. You have 45 minutes, at the end of which there will be a quiz on what you read. You may begin." The teacher continued to walk around the room, peeking over the students' shoulders, enjoying the sound of silence that should accompany schoolwork. She glanced at the children's faces as she passed them. Her work was exquisite. The stitches were hardly noticeable where she had sewn their bodies back together. That summer course in taxidermy had indeed paid off. She looked around the room at the silent, stuffed children sitting at the desks and smiled. She could finally get some real teaching done without any interruptions. This was going to be a great year. "Man, I'd give anything for better skin." Roy looked at his reflection in a store window, at the bump on his forehead and the swelling on his chin. Pimple Boy. That's what his friends called him. Behind the glass, he noticed a round-faced doll with a mop of black hair staring at him. Rosy cheeks, Roy observed. Lucky boy. You've never had this problem, huh, porcelain boy? Roy muttered. When the doll on the shelf started to seem sympathetic towards his problems, he laughed at himself and hurried on home. Hey Roy, do you ever wash your face? His roommates weren't any more forgiving than his friends were. At 20, his acne was just as terrible as it has been in his teens. That night, he looked at his reflection in the bathroom mirror, at the bottles of ineffective acne medication, at the variety of creams and exfoliants that never lived up to their promise. The bumps on his skin gleamed at him, throbbing with pus, and Roy did do all he could not to pick at his skin. I'd give anything, he whispered, and he meant it. The next morning, his skin looked better already. The zits on his cheeks were suddenly calmed into tame pink swells, no longer taunting him with their sickly yellow heads. His hope was renewed. Morning came and went, as mornings usually did, and Roy's acne continued to fade. His blackheads were the next to go, and soon the pores that seemed like the craters on the moon shrunk too. Whether he washed his face or not no longer mattered. His skin took on a dewy glow regardless. The girls he knew began to drill him on his skincare routine. Some skincare routine, he scoffed, proud of his own luck. Then, Roy woke up with a numbness over his cheeks. It mimicked the familiar tingling of frozen wind, except it burrowed far deeper into his skin. He touched his cheeks and was petrified by how much it felt like the surface of a bathroom sink. In a flurry of panic, he jolted into the bathroom. What he saw in his reflection terrified him. His entire face was eggshell white, smooth as polished marble. No matter how much he leaned towards the mirror, he couldn't find a single pore on the surface of his skin. He was repulsed by how perfect his skin looked, how out of place it seemed in this murky bathroom mirror. The disgust that was caused by his newfound perfection wasn't the worst of his discoveries. When he opened his medicine cabinet, he found the doll from behind the store window, gaping at him. The mop of inky hair remained, but the once flawless porcelain face was now riddled with pustules and swells. The doll smiled, the pimples on its face flaring morbidly. Roy opened his mouth to gasp, maybe even to scream, but he couldn't. His face was taut, completely solid. He was the porcelain boy now. That thing, whatever the hell it is, hasn't stopped chasing us this whole time. This time. How long has it been exactly? I look down, my clothes torn, my shoes missing, feet bleeding out. We might have been running for days. We run on, its bleeding white eyes projecting our shadows ahead of us. I turn to him. He's no better, at least physically speaking. His eyes are tired, but his pace remains consistent. The woods stretch out indefinitely. Are they even woods? I was certain we had been running through trees, yet now they look more like grey tendrils, stretching up into the ether. I try as hard as I can to remember how we arrived here, but even that becomes a challenge. I think that's when I realize. Hey, I call out, even though we were mere feet apart. Now's really not the time. He has a point, I persist. I've had an idea. What? Try and remember how we got here. We run in silence for a moment. I don't know. What? I can't remember. He sounds almost like he finds the fact amusing. It is, in a way. What if none of this is real? It sounds beyond stupid saying it aloud. But he pauses. Hell, what if? I think you might be right. Now I'm doubting the theory myself, but it only makes sense. He pulls out the gun that I now remember we've had with us the entire time. How do we know which of us is dreaming? I stare at him, then my own hands. I sure as hell feel real. Do you feel real? Of course I do, and I'm willing to bet you do too. Oh, Jesus Christ, shoot me in the foot. I say it without really thinking it through. If I'm dreaming, then surely the sensation will be enough to wake me up. I suppose that makes sense. He does as he's told. The pain is indescribable. Then, nothing. I take the gun. Wait! He looks at the ground, conflicted. Then, back at me. Go for the head. What the hell are you? I'm serious. You have to trust me. Think about it. If I'm dreaming, I'll wake up and none of this is real. If you're dreaming, then you haven't killed anyone. My hands shake. The monster comes closer. I can hear its fierce drone and a sharp cry, like that of a banshee. I open fire. The monster stops. The woods around us dim as it closes its eyes. I keep my eyes firmly on the body all the while. Keep your hands in the air. We have you surrounded. I do as they say. Eyes on the body. Don't worry, officer. None of this is real. Trembling, I bring the gun to my head. They all tense, giving shouts of defiance, commanding me to stop. None of it matters though. This is just a nightmare. Hey sweetie, I think I hear Ashlyn crying in her bedroom. I'll be back in a sec. I give Sarah a quick peck on the lips and extract myself from beneath our shared blanket on the couch. Don't be long, she says, with a twinkle in her eye. She's a stunner. I'm a lucky guy. As I make my way down the hall, I hear my 6-year-old baby girl sobbing, but in a tired way, like she would if she has just woken up. Must have been a nightmare, I think. I push open the door, grope my way past the walk-in closet, and take a seat beside her. Shh, it's okay, Angel. Daddy's here now. She snuggles into my armpit as I run my fingers through her golden locks. Hey, Daddy. Did you have a bad dream, Angel? No. Ashlyn sniffs and wipes her tears. Oh, okay. Then why are you sad, honey? It's just that I like Sarah a lot. She's really fun. Like when we made cookies that one time. Uh-huh, I agree. She thinks you're the absolute best too, you know that? But that shouldn't make you sad. Friends make us happy. She doesn't say anything for a moment, just picks at the bottom of my shirt. Yeah, but Mommy's gonna kill her, Daddy. It takes me a second. There is a moment of panic before I realize what she's saying. It was a running gag between my late wife and I. She always said she'd kill any lady who tried to move in on her turf. I guess Ashlyn must have taken that more seriously than intended. Oh, Angel, Mommy isn't going to hurt Sarah, I say with a chuckle, giving my little girl a warm hug. You don't have to worry about anything, for 2 reasons. First, is it because Mommy's dead? Unnerving. Ah, well, yes, I guess you could say that. Silence. You know Mommy will always be with you, right? Just like I always say. Ashlyn sniffs and nods. But Daddy, Mommy told me she's going to kill Sarah if she doesn't leave you alone. What? When did she tell you that? I hadn't met Sarah until a year after Melissa's fatal car accident. A little bit ago, Daddy, before she left the closet. My heart stops and I suddenly seize Ashlyn with both hands. Probably a bit too roughly. What are you talking about? It's not nice to lie, Ashlyn. He starts crying again, saying, But I'm not lying. Mommy was in the closet and she was singing my favorite Frozen song with me. But then she said she was going to kill Sarah because he belonged to her forever. There's a loud crash in the living room. A scream. Sarah! See, I'm not lying, Daddy. I'm too late to save Sarah. When I reach her, she's already dead. A knife in her neck. My dead wife's wedding ring rests beside Sarah's body. Her bloodied footprint lead into the kitchen. In our hillside town, where flowers grew waist high in vast fields of color, lives were infected by an almost comical sense of bliss. For as long as the cordial, beaming sun was in the sky, every breath like enlightenment. There was, however, a consequence to our way of life. Come nighttime, a man on a unicycle patrolled the streets in tethered overalls and polka dot socks. He played the harmonica, and he played it eerily well. His constant melody was "Mary Had a Little Lamb," but on some days he changed it, depending on the activities in town. On our town's anniversary, he played our hymn. Our festivals, he played whatever songs was popular, regardless of genre. We were advised to never make eye contact with him, for reasons unknown, but he had a way of tempting us to come to our windows and look right at him. He was the reason some bedrooms had boarded windows. Once, he passed by our house and played a song that was playing when I kissed my girlfriend in my bedroom that afternoon. Dream a little, dream of me. In that moment, I could almost imagine his face, pale, perhaps, and gaunt, with a smarmy grin and a suggestive wink, as if to say he knew what we kids were up to. Oh, I bet the creep did know. I was skimming through the last 20 pages of Little Woman, a charming little novel by Louisa May Alcott, urging myself to finish the book tonight so I could wake up feeling accomplished. As the words became muddled, the sound of that distant harmonica began. Mary had a little lamb. Nothing special on his repertoire. I panicked when I realized that my curtains were still open. I stood up, squinting to limit my field of vision, and reached out for the curtains. The music stopped. I looked outside the window to expect him gone. Yet, there he stayed, and there we were, eyes locked in an inescapable gaze. There was neither horror nor comfort in the plain set of features that I saw. He had the most average eyes, nose, and lips on this side of town, and they were contoured in an expression of hollow grief. I gasped and pulled my curtains closed. Trembling, I turned to lock the door and covered myself in my sheets. The unmistakable sound of the harmonica was growing louder outside my bedroom door, and it was now filled with something I hadn't noticed before. Sorrow, suffering, loneliness. I then began to weep. I wept until my lungs bled, until my eyes burnt, until I could no longer comprehend what happiness felt like. It was painful. Through my tears, I opened my eyes and saw the unicycle man standing over my bedside. He was looking at me, balancing on his unicycle, and began to play "It's a Small World" on his harmonica, as if to mock my agony. Misery loved company, after all. My eyes flew open when a hand clamped over my mouth. "Do not move." The man leaning over me commanded. A knife glimmered in the darkness. A surge of fear jolted through me. Without thinking, I thrust my hand upwards into his face and felt my palm meet his nose with a revolting crunch. When he howled in pain, I hurled myself out of bed and dove into the adjoining bathroom. I slammed the door shut and turned its lock only seconds before he smashed into it. "Get out of there!" he shouted. Heavily battering thuds shook the door. "Take whatever you want and go," I yelled back. "I won't call the police, I swear." He fell silent. I held my breath anxiously. For a fleet moment, I thought he was gone, only for my stomach to drop when I heard the sound of a knife's blade gouging into the wood. I realized with horror that he was trying to carve his way through to me. "Please stop," I whimpered. "This isn't even my house. The Day family hired me to stay here while they're on vacation." Suddenly, I was struck by the strong scent of rubbing alcohol. I looked down to see clear liquid spreading beneath the door and across the bathroom tiles. "You have 10 seconds to come out," the man said threateningly, or I light the match. A dizzying wave of terror washed over me. I gripped the sink to keep from falling. 10, he barked. 9. My eyes frantically searched the room for anything to defend myself with. 8, 7, 6. I felt as if I was being torn in half by an excruciating decision. Accept whatever violent fate awaited outside the door, or perish in a fiery blaze. 5, 4, 3. I flung open the door. The man raised his knife, and I emptied the contents of a hairspray canister into his eyes. He screamed in agony as I pushed past him and ran. I made it to the staircase before he grabbed me by the hair and threw me onto the ground. His poisoned eyes were a furious shade of inflamed red. "I'll kill you," the man roared. He lifted a foot to stomp on my head, but his polluted vision slowed him and gave me enough time to deliver a swift kick to his knee. He lost his balance and stumbled backwards. By the time he realized he was falling, it was already too late. He plummeted down the stairs and landed in a bloodied, broken heap. As I approached the man's crumbled body, I noticed a small blinking light fastened to his chest. Confusion dawned on me when I realized he was wearing a camera. I nearly jumped when his phone began vibrating in his pocket. Unknown number. I answered it silently. A hideous sense of shock overtook me when a familiar voice spoke into my ear. "Is she dead yet?" Mr. Day asked excitedly. "I can't wait to see the footage." I once woke up with a hot, raw pain on the skin around my left eye. It was a sty, flushed and gleaming like a pimple, no larger than a pea on my upper eyelid. I tried to treat it with eye drops. A week went, nothing. A certain doctor prescribed another bottle of eye drops and some antibiotics. Nothing. I woke up only to be taunted by the sight of the cyst on my eyelid. The vision on my left eye was obscured, and pus would sometimes leak out of the sty and into my eye, leaving me with an awful burn. 2 weeks later, the sty had doubled in size. I saw doctor after doctor, subjecting myself to an eternal array of antibiotics and eye drops and placebos. Nothing worked. By then, my left eye vision had completely disappeared, and the sty began to pulsate with an indescribable scalding heat. On the third Tuesday, I woke up gasping and sweating and shaking, heat bursting from my left eye. A damp warmth had covered the entirety of my left cheek, and a putrid smell snaked its way into my nostrils. It was the smell of rotting eggs and battery acid and burning plastic. I leaped out of bed and ran towards the mirror. When I saw my reflection, my stomach churned. As I heaved over the sink, I trembled. My left eye socket was left hollow, a gaping red hole, oozing with white pus. My face was sticky and burning. The sty had disappeared, and so had my left eye. My head suddenly weighed like a ship's anchor to my feeble body. The yellow bathroom tiles looked red to me, and the smell of air freshener suddenly smelled like breakfast on a Sunday. It disgusted me. I vomited again. My knees buckled. My knuckles turned blue. My mind was overcome by fog. I fell onto the floor, unconscious, bathed in a frigid lack of understanding. I woke up to the sensation of my left eye being nibbled on, and my senses immediately returned. I sat up, swatting at the air, when I hit something solid. I opened my right eye, which was hot with pain, and saw a grey face right in front of me. It belonged to a scrawny creature, almost human-like, with white eyes as big as saucers on its vacant face. A pair of chapped lips sat calmly above the bony chin, wet with spit and God knows what. It staggered away from me, naked. I saw that it had no belly button or genitals, and in place of feet were another pair of hands. I opened my mouth to scream, and was caught off guard when it suddenly crawled up the wall like a lizard and disappeared through the small window in the bathroom. I stood up feverishly and looked at myself in the mirror. My left eye was gone, and on my right eye was a sty, flushed and gleaming like a pimple, no larger than a pea on my upper eyelid. Everyone is looking up at the sky, all of us asking the same thing. What in the hell is that? I'm sitting in the backyard with my wife and kids, looking at the moon. There's a large black scar across it, and of course the internet is abuzz with all kind of theories. It's a Nazi moon base. It's a giant space turd. I'm not really sold on any theory yet, but I would be lying if I didn't say the giant turd theory is what I'm hoping for. My children keep asking me, "Daddy, what is that?" I keep having to tell them, "It's a big old moon slug, just looking for some food." They laugh and giggle, and then we do the whole thing over. Each time I come up with something different. A moon snake, a moon canyon. Something I like to say is a moon tree that fell over. We do this mainly when we sit out by the fire pit in the backyard. We roast some hot dogs and make some s'mores, and just take in the night air before bedtime. It's been roughly 2 weeks since what the internet is calling McMoonpoo came into existence. There has been no word from our government or NASA on what it truly is. However, you don't need to work for NASA to get a nice shot of the moon. It took maybe 25 minutes before the photos were online. Incredibly detailed photos from some observatory in Denmark. The moonpoo was actually a large crack in the moon's surface. The canyon was enormous, and after some simple measurements, It was easy to tell that the shape and circumference of the moon were distorted as well. Most people thought it was a meteor impact that damaged the moon. However, the notion was easily put out to bed by the lack of space debris and NASA not detecting any meteors that could have done such damage. Days continue to go by, and the moon poo continues to get larger. The size is indistinguishable to the naked eye, but when measured with telescopes, the change is massively evident. Most of us had no idea there was anything wrong. I am unsure if NASA or SpaceX thought there was something wrong. That is, until the moon, in real time, did the Pac-Man death animation. All it took was one person to notice before everyone were looking into the sky, watching the event take place. I could hear the TV describes what NASA has discovered as I watched the entire thing unfold. We were wrong. It was never a moon. It was an egg. So, you've done it this time. There's a faceless, pale, spindly figure with razor-sharp teeth and an unholy grin stalking your dreams. Its bones crack and pop like a bottle of bubbly, and it's cuddling right at you like a bug on drugs. What do? Do you board up your windows and spend the last 10 minutes of your life posting what led up to this moment on Reddit? Do you leave a vaguely cryptic warning for those who stumble across your mangled corpse via a confused title? Of course not. You're going to live to see another day. Here's a list of do's and don'ts to help you survive. Number 1. The most important rule. Get outside. There's a much better chance of you escaping these things if you're not trapped in a box and waiting for them to knock down your door. Hunger drives them blind to the point where they won't realize you're gone until a few minutes later. That gives you time to prepare. Number 2. Do not use firearms. Even the sight or smell of their own blood frenzies them. The gunshot isn't the problem. It's the lingering scent of gunpowder on your clothes that they're after. If you must defend yourself, throw rocks at them. This will remind them of the stoning they suffered before their current state. Number 3. Come to the forest. They won't enter the woods if you're in deep enough. Number 4. If you're near the sea, dive into the ocean and swim as far away from the shore as you can without being carried off. There are things beneath the waves that even they won't risk approaching. Number 5. Cemeteries offer a temporary distraction as they get confused by the screams, but once they make it out, it's hard to trap them again. Number 6. They will avoid alley cats that wander in the night. This does not mean you're safe to approach the cats as well. Number 7. Lastly, churches aren't always the best place to hide. These things are atheists, and some things will help them open the doors from the inside. Got all that? Good. I hope this helps you see the sunrise one more day. And if they stop chasing you at any point, don't worry about what could have scared them away. Just keep going. Again, like I said, forests are ideal, because unlike them, we love a good chase. I recognize the type the moment he walks in. Impeccably dressed, annoyingly clean, well-mannered, kind eyes hiding burning ambition. "Is he up, doctor?" he asks. "I'm awake," I reply, exasperated that I'm never directly involved in my own recovery, always someone else making decision. "Oh, hello, Mr. Palmer," he smiles. I know who you are," I interrupt. journalist, undoubtedly here to pen my amazing story. Well, actually, he says, the smile all gone. Yes, I am. Do you mind? What else am I good for these days? I complain somberly. As I'm sure you're aware, I was in a coma for 15 years. You might have heard about the guy who lived an entire life in his coma. Wife, kids, house, he had it all. He experienced it all. As real as me and you are sitting here now. You must understand. This wasn't just a simple dream. No, this was alive. Vivid, beautiful, fleeting. The guy was devastated when he snapped out of it. Horribly depressed. I don't know what happened to him. But I can tell you what happened to me, because I lived through the same thing, except there was no beauty in my life. No, I lived 15 years of pure torture. I've been mutilated and murdered more times than anyone can count. Tormented in ways unimaginable. Not a single second of peace or comfort. I'd wake up in pain, gangrenous wounds dripping with pus, drag my mangled body across the floor, never once reaching the door. Immense pain shoots through my body. Sometimes he'd saw off my leg, sometimes an arm, always dismemberment. Then he really goes to work, you know. Pluck out an eye, rip out my tongue. Hot pokers in exposed flesh, needles in nerve endings, rusty serrated blade against bones. Conscious as he digs into my body, removing internal organs with violent grace, not a moment of peace. And then I wake up, and it would start all over again. Is this hell? I'd ask myself. Did I die? But I didn't, did I? I was just sleeping, just dreaming, all this time. Just a perpetual nightmare. 15 years of ceaseless torture. And then I woke up. That's my story. Now please, leave me alone. You're wrong, the journalist says. What do you mean, wrong? I ask confusedly. I'm not a journalist, he says, eyes turning darker by the second. I'm her husband. What? Who? You took her from me, tortured her for days, slaughtered her in that godforsaken hole. No. And now you must live through what she endured. Every day, a new lifetime of pain. No, I whisper. No, that's not true. Put him under, doctor, he says. I'll be back again tomorrow. The doctor complies. A swift needle to my arm. Moments later, I'm gone. And then I wake up. Gangrenous wounds dripping with pus. Drag my mangled body across the floor. There's a door. I have to reach the door. So, Mr. Stickland, tell us about your name. Stickman, it's rather self-explanatory, isn't it? I have a penchant for painting cadavers, or stickmen. The intricate subtleties of decay, rot, muscular decomposition, and tissue defilement's a particular interest of mine. After a while, the critics started calling me Stickman, and with the time, I simply embraced the name. And the inspiration behind these paintings? Oh, you know, the usual. It started out pretty mundane. Books on anatomy, horror, art macabre, the odd autopsy report. Autopsy reports? Yeah, I'd toss a corner a few coins, and she'd look the other way while I studied some of the photos. I would guess half of my works are inspired by a sordid mix of those. And the other half? Oh, you know how it goes. Art is all about pushing boundaries, challenging the status quo, moving past invisible barriers, raging against the machine, etc. The next logical step was of course to bring in a real one for close examination. A real one? A real cadaver. And boy, they aren't as easy to come by as you might think. So how did you get them? I attempted to go through the proper channels first. I really did. Late night visits to the graveyards with a shovel. You know the drill. But have you ever tried exhuming a body? It's exhausting. 6 feet of excruciating manual labor. Took me 3 hours to get nowhere before I just gave up. So how then? I had to make them, didn't I? It's not like they wouldn't have died anyways. Just help them along. Gave them a little push. Sometimes a little stab. I know it might sound extreme, but that's art for you. You can't hold back, lest you betray the very essence of who you are. How many? Half a dozen. I'd keep them propped up for a month or so. You know, to observe early decomposition, savoring the scent, the beauties of bacterias at work. Have you ever seen my piece, The Putrefaction Oranos? It was the first one inspired by my newfound process. I have not. And what about the last one? Ah yes, my magnum opus. She's the reason I'm here, is she not? Elvira the Eternal. To be honest, she's the only one I'd call a true model, you know? There was just something about her. How long, Stickland? Oh, she was important. I had special plans for her. I knew it from the moment I saw her. Fragile, but powerful. Scared, but beautiful. It was the next step, detective. Always the next step. How long, you piece of shit? I kept her alive for 13 months. Sliced off a little piece of her every day. The tissue decomposition of a living model is something special to behold. Factor in the pain, the screams, the smell, the putrid flesh. Pure perfection. You've seen the painting. 1,000 years from now, that's all they'll remember. You monster. All they'll remember is the art.